Good evening. I'm Deborah Arneson, your host for tonight. We have yet another fantastic show for you, so do not turn that dial. Once again, we have Peter Adams, who's an extraordinary chef, educator, and teacher, and a superb professional over at the Illinois Institute, right? And how long have you been there?
I've been there now since for about 4.5 years, actually.
Gosh, it's going fast, isn't it?
It is.
When did they open?
I don't even remember the year now, but we're actually into almost beginning our 6th year.
The Illinois Institute of Art has how many different curriculums it offers?
Oh, and I probably would get in trouble for not knowing this, but
I'm sure quite a few.
We have quite a few. The Illinois Institute of Art is part of a much larger family of companies called the Art Institutes International, and it's primarily a art school. It began as an art school. And actually culinary arts, of which I'm a part, obviously, was a fairly new addition within the last 10 years. And so everything from fashion design to interior design, all the way to culinary arts now.
Where's the school located again? It's on
the main
Lake?
school's at 350 North Orleans, the Apparel Center. But our school, our part of the school, culinary arts, and now an increasing portion of the school, particularly that portion which relates to computer-aided design and game design, for example, is at 180 North Wabash, almost the corner of Lake and Wabash Avenue, where we have a restaurant, student-populated restaurant.
Oh, really?
In all of our kitchens, yes, absolutely.
Well, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to come over.
Please do. I keep
inviting
you.
Hang out. You do. I'm going to make way to do that. I'm on my way. You'll see me every day, like sitting there with my little bucket going, feed me. Okay. Peter, this is really a great history you have. So it's important to me because Peter and I work together. I refer clients to Peter, and Peter comes in and helps people get their life in order and helps with food and cooking and takes all the fear out of like how to take care of yourself from a nutritional perspective in the kitchen. So, but you started out, if I'm not mistaken, in banking, right? So this is your second career shift, right? You were in banking for quite some time. How many years? Tell us your
actually,
history.
This is probably more like a third career shift, but I was in banking for almost 16 years.
Wow.
I was actually head of international corporate banking for a large bank locally, and or at least I ended up.
Were they shocked when you were like, hey, I'm out of here?
They were, actually, and it took them 3 months to actually realize that I was serious.
They thought he was going through menopause.
Yeah, apparently. But they finally got the idea that I was leaving.
What made you decide to shift career tracks? How did you come to being a teacher, educator, and a chef?
Well, when I originally left that career, I think I did it just as a lot of people are doing it. And by the way, an increasing amount of our students, and we're not certainly unique, at least 35% of vocationally oriented schools out there are what I call retreads, and that's certainly my term. But we call them career changers.
Yes.
But basically, these are people who are in their second or their third career, and they've made these life-changing decisions. And at least in my case, it was a life-changing decision that started out as, I guess you would call it growing malaise. And in my job, I traveled an awful lot, and I traveled around the world, and I guess on paper it looks great, and some of the stories I have to tell are fantastic stories. But the reality of it is...
Were you ever home? Or home
I was
enough?
home, but you know, my personal life did suffer. And I got to see some, on paper I got to see some great places, but really what that meant was I got to see a lot of airports and hotels and cars. And you know, my career took a change that I didn't like, and I started doing things even at a more senior level that I just really didn't enjoy doing.
I see.
And at some point I just found myself saying, you know, enough is enough.
What am I doing?
Some people have said that, well, that's heroic, or that took a lot of courage, and I don't view it that way, and I don't think most career changers would. I think in my case it was just a cry for help. It was basically, I'm either going to do this or I'm going to die.
Really?
So a slow death, a heart attack.
Albeit,
or
but
something.
the stress was incredible. And how old were you when you shifted careers?
I was at that point in probably my mid or early 30s, mid 30s probably.
Wow.
I had no idea I would end up
what you wanted to do.
I just knew at that point that I needed to be gone from where I was.
Wow.
And I think if you ask my lovely wife, who you know,
yeah, she's a doll.
and definitely the better half of this arrangement.
We love it when guys say that, don't we?
And
yes,
believe
totally.
me, it is totally true.
She's a peach.
Yeah.
She is a peach.
She's a keeper.
Yes, she is.
But if you ask her, I think she honestly believed that I would end up in something very unusual. And you know, she actually said, I think you're going to end up cooking.
She said that?
She did.
She knew. Wow.
After the fact. But I actually sat home for probably a month. I had not had a vacation in a long time, and I really needed to just
chill.
Yeah, do nothing.
Yeah.
Long enough to realize that I'm not a person that does nothing well, and it just slowly began to realize, the things that I did well, the things that I really enjoyed doing, I just was not going to probably end up being able to do
right.
in another institution.
Right.
And then the question was, well, what do I do?
Right.
And don't ask me how, but I kind of decided that, hey, I enjoy cooking, and maybe I have to look at these cooking schools. So I started interviewing cooking schools, and I found myself enrolling in one.
Seriously?
And then yeah, exactly. And I found myself one fine day sitting outside one as a student and looking at the young people, because at 35 I was old. And they were very, very young.
Wow.
And thinking, my God, you have lost your mind.
And then what?
But you know what? About a month or so into it,
and this is going to be fun.
I realized, this is...
I like it.
Yeah, this is good.
I like it.
I love working with food, and
yeah.
I think I could do this.
You're passionate about food, that's for sure. So that's how you came to be where you are.
Yeah,
how fun.
I got the education and found that I loved to do the education, and I was so passionate about it that the school that I was working at, or that I was going to, I came in early and I left late, and I volunteered to do anything I possibly could do.
Wow.
And then after a while, they said, finally, hey, you know what? If this guy's going to hang around enough, we might as well just pay him.
This is at the Illinois Institute of Art?
No, this was actually before the Illinois Institute of Art existed. I was at the College of DuPage at the time.
Okay.
And at that point, they offered me a position.
Good.
And they said, hey, we might as well offer this guy some money.
That's fantastic.
Because he's working here.
So that's where you started.
So I started out there and worked out in the field simultaneously, and worked off and on.
What does out in the field mean?
Out in the field means getting what I guess some people would call a real job.
Okay.
Not an education job.
Okay.
Apparently some people don't think that education is a real job.
It's a real job, right? It's too much fun.
And all I can tell you is, come into the classroom for about 5 minutes.
Do you know, I do that all the time. I tell people, if you had my life, you'd fall on your back like a cockroach with your feet in the air.
Yeah, I mean, there are great chefs and there are great teachers, but it's
hard to find somebody who can do both.
Exactly.
Sure, absolutely.
But out in the field really means you're in a kitchen, you're in a work environment that you're trained to be in. And I worked at, for example, I worked at a place that's thankfully gone, and I won't name the name, out in the very far western suburbs, a fine dining establishment.
Way out there, yep.
That, where actually I met my boss that brought me on at the Illinois Institute of Art.
Okay.
And he had been brought in as a consultant, and I had been brought in as a consultant at that point, and I ran the front of the house, and I was kitchen manager.
Okay.
Fine dining and
You went from
dining.
one high-stress profession, though, to another, because according to research studies, the restaurant industry or the food industry is considered, I think, the third highest stressed industry you could possibly be in. I think physicians are 1. I don't remember what number 2 is, but restaurants are 3.
I could believe
you're dealing with the public, and you're dealing with just timing.
Yeah,
so.
It comes down to timing, and I tend to believe that we gravitate towards those areas that we
that will just keep us tweaked.
Yes, that's exactly right.
So tell me how you picked the Illinois Institute. Does the educational philosophy suit you as well, or does it meld with your own? What is the philosophy?
Illinois Institute of Art was a great opportunity 5 years ago when, about a little over 5 years ago, my boss at the time was approached to open Illinois Institute of Art locally by the company, and they really wanted Illinois Institute of Art Chicago to become a flagship culinary school. And as you know, we have some very fine culinary schools locally already, and we'll always have some very fine culinary schools, and they are competitors of ours, but you know, we share a lot of things in common. One of which is a desire for the same students, I might add, but you know. But he brought with him some very unique qualities, and those qualities were that he had been the chef director at all of those schools.
Wow.
And had taught at pretty much all of the other ones.
That's great.
And so he tried to bring together instructors and staff that were a fair representation of not only field experience, that is fine cuisine,
education, hands-on experience,
all of those skills into a new and unique school, and it was not just so that we could benefit our students directly, but in a sense so that we could learn from our mistakes, bring the best of everything that we had learned, and apply it to the school.
That's great.
And as you well know, I mean, we went from 0 students and just grew like gangbusters.
Your reputation precedes you.
It was just phenomenal.
Plus, you do a lot of community work, right? I mean, you work with the city of Chicago.
We do. We work very closely through Gallery 37, which, as you know, is the school, the city of Chicago's arts promotion vehicle.
Right, for high schoolers, right?
At the high school level, we work through Careers Through Culinary Arts, CCAP. And ProStart, which are also all very much high school-oriented programs.
That's great.
And of course, we do a lot of fundraising events and whatnot.
That mayor of ours is doing such a great job, isn't he?
Well, he does
pushing education a bit.
He does do a lot for the inner city, and you got to give him a lot of credit for that. Whatever your other political leanings may be, I mean, he does do a lot.
Yeah, he and his wife work on education a lot. That's great. Okay, so let me ask you this. How has culinary education evolved or is evolving, and how does this affect overall education? Do you think more and more people are becoming more and more aware that food can actually impact your health or heal you or make you sick? Do you think people are starting to get it? I mean, people are suing McDonald's, which I think is not all a bad thing, or Burger King, whoever else they're suing. I don't know. Well, I don't like to see anybody get sued, but, you know, people also
are suing everybody.
People need to also educate themselves here a little bit, wouldn't you say?
Well, that's kind of a two-part question. You know, how is culinary education, or how is education evolving? And I think culinary education, for many years, was vocational education, and even our company would prefer that we not refer to it that way. But fundamentally, culinary education or vocational education just means this: we're teaching someone how to do something,
right?
A practical skill,
right?
And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's a good thing. And I like to tell the students that when I do orientation, that, hey, you bring with you a fire. And my job as an educator, my job as assistant director, is to make sure that all of our educators around me stoke that fire. But, you know, if you don't bring that fire with you,
there it is.
I can't light it.
Right.
So as things have evolved, the requirements out there in the field for companies, whether they be McDonald's, believe it or not, which has test kitchens, R&D kitchens, research and development kitchens, although we don't tend to think that they do much, they do, all the way up to very fine dining establishments. They have placed a huge demand on highly trained and highly skilled people. It used to be for many, many years, the way that you got the skill was you started out at age 12 and you washed dishes and you slowly worked your way up.
Right.
And if you didn't get beat up or kicked out and you didn't just wash out, literally and figuratively, you learned.
You made your way,
Well, our educational philosophy is, and you'll excuse the expression, slapping someone upside the head is not the most motivating tool. So we try to take a little bit different approach. And we try to educate through a combination of knowledge, So we use theory, and we try to integrate that with skills. And because one of the things that we know for sure, and one of the things that we share in common with the rest of our degreed students, the rest of the arts, is that people in our field, people that go into culinary arts or people that go into interior design, share a one strong thing, and that is that we tend to be kinesthetic learners. We tend to learn by seeing and by doing. The more we do, the more we learn. So the more I can actually put a knife into somebody's hand, the more that I can explain to them why it is that that works, the more they're going to retain about it.
Sure.
So that demand has elevated what used to be, you know, the old home economics,
right?
Which there was nothing wrong with. But you're now going into some of these high schools that we're now training some of those teachers.
Are they bringing home ec back? Because a lot of high schools...
Home ec is gone.
That's
in
what I
its
thought.
old form. Home ec is now culinary arts.
That's great.
And some of these high schools, they're running their
own little kitchen and
kitchens. They're doing their restaurants, and some of them rival some of the stuff that we're doing.
That's fantastic.
That's totally fantastic.
That is great.
And again, as I said earlier, part of what's changing too is not only those demands, but we're getting older people.
Yeah.
And some of the older people have different demands. They tend to be more, they have higher expectation level. That's good. It keeps us on our toes.
Right, raises the bar for everybody.
It absolutely does.
So how does nutrition fit into your educational agenda? Is that a big portion of the learning?
Yeah, you would be surprised at how little it was, not until very, very recently, and you alluded to that. I mean, people have begun to sue people over
poor food choices at McDonald's,
poor food choices. And while I'm not necessarily a great advocate of suing McDonald's about, you know, whether or not I choose to eat a Big Mac or whatever.
Well, I do remember though when I heard that suing thing was coming out, that I remember my daughter being 3 years old, and so I was of course 21 at the time. I was a very young mother, and I didn't know how to cook. I always baked. My mom taught me how to bake when I was growing up, but I did not prepare meals, so I never had the skills to prepare meals. Everything was macaroni and cheese or out of a box or tater tots on top of greasy hamburger baked in the oven. It was horrible. And so when I moved to Chicago, I could take my daughter to McDonald's without fear, because I read that the American Dietetic Association gave their stamp of approval on McDonald's as the most balanced meal a child could eat. Not exaggerating. The potatoes were the vegetable, the malt was the dairy, and the meat was the protein. And that's all you needed, was a vegetable, a dairy, and a protein, according to the food pyramid at that time. I was like, yes! My daughter was dragged to McDonald's for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, not exaggerating, for about 3 years. And then when she turned 6, literally, the brakes went on one day outside McDonald's up on Clark Street, and she started screaming. My kid was not an emotional child. And she's like, I don't ever want to eat there again. And I was like, what's wrong with you? She goes, I can't stand this McDonald's. She'd go to sleepovers, and they'd be like, well, kids, we're going to McDonald's. And she'd be like, blah, I wanted a home-cooked meal. So I learned at an early age, my kid had more sense than me, my child. And you know what? A couple years later, when I went to school, I realized, boy, was that ever a bogus thing? They must have paid him a whole lot of money for that endorsement. You know, so I mean, I can understand people suing McDonald's because there's been this preemptive, you know, advertising going around saying that, hey, we're good, we're wholesome, we're natural, please. You know, so on one level, part of me is like, psh, you know, I mean, unknowledgeable consumers, of which most people are, because we're so busy living our lives. You know, most people don't have access to this information.
Yeah, well, as you know, ketchup is considered, or was considered recently,
a vegetable.
But you know, we could probably have
we could go on and
on about that. But nutrition, you're right. There was a lot of misunderstanding about nutrition.
Yeah.
People know about as much about nutrition in this country as they do not know about cooking. And that's not to speak ill of people. There's just a lot of misinformation out there.
Well, and we've gotten so far away from families and cultures teaching their children and their children's children. You know, I mean, kids used to hang out in the kitchen with grandma or auntie. You know, our families are so distended at this point. We're all over the continent. So there is no one teaching the youth what to do, and we're growing up on fast foods, frozen foods, quick foods, you know, things like that. So the whole unity of like how information is passed along generation to generation is extinct, pretty much.
Well, and you know, there's a cultural context. I mean, someday we should spend some time talking about the cultural context of nutrition. You know, the Italian grandmother that says mangia, mangia. I mean, she's talking about eating within a context of people who historically have been out working, and they've been very active, and there's there's an entire thing behind it where fundamentally those people do not get heart disease or have much lower incidence, and they're much healthier people, right? But you know, now those demands are there. One of the fastest growing segments, whether we like it or not, as a chef or in the cooking business, one of the fastest growing segments of of our growth of our business is what we now euphemistically refer to as assisted care living.
I bet, because I get a lot of calls about,
And basically what that means is that people that have incredibly knowledgeable palates, old people like myself, I'm getting older by the day.
Do not call yourself old, because I would be older than you, so knock it off.
People that are on our way to, you know,
to our golden years.
Yeah, golden years. But we have very sophisticated palate, and we've traveled. So our expectation level is much different, and our longevity, hopefully, is going to be different. And so, you know, going into a retirement community now means not necessarily getting nursing care. It means maybe as much as, or as little as, someone mowing the lawn, but being in an environment where if you needed something extra, you could get it.
Right.
So for our industry, that means that people that are going into that industry need to be really conversant with things like, what is the impact of salt?
Right.
What are salt substitutes? You know, how do you manage
flavor
fat?
Substitutes,
How do you, you know, balance issues with fat and subtract fat by adding flavor? You know, most people don't know this, but those become nutritional issues.
And what's really the most irksome thing to me, Peter, when I see like ads or I hear commercials on the radio, is like they talk about fats and they never, or print on the Tribune, they'll be talking about foods. They never denote or delineate the fact or point out that the fact that there are different kinds of fats. There are healthy fats, there are unhealthy fats. They're always slamming fats as bad over the board. That's not the case.
Just as they are saying no fat. Well, no fat doesn't mean much if you eat a ton of it.
Right.
You can still become overweight.
Right.
It still can be bad for you.
Right.
Our school is a little bit unique because we have a nutritional cooking class. And
that's cool.
Not a lot of places do. And in that class, people learn to deal with things like celiac disease.
Oh, that's great.
And
how to cook for specific disease states.
How to cook for very specific diseases.
That's
because
excellent.
the reality is people have to deal with those diseases. And as a chef, it places a very unique demand upon us. And, you know, people...
Crohn's disease, IBS.
Exactly.
I mean, those are great. That's great. So we're, believe it or not, running out of time again. So tell us about your educational philosophy and what you're doing at Healing Quest with the walkabouts and the cooking classes, and how you're incorporating the nutrition, of course, into all of this, and a little bit about sustainable agriculture and what that means to the consumer. You got 4 minutes.
That's a lot. Educational philosophy, a little bit about the educational philosophy, is really that has to be fun and has to be interactive.
Yeah.
And so whether it's serious business. I mean, you know, the life of living is serious, but it doesn't mean that it has to be so serious that we can't have a little bit of fun of it. But interactive makes it learnable.
And memorable.
And memorable.
Right.
So when you do these walkabouts, and the walkabouts really consist of, I guess, a shortened version of the nutritional counseling, and they have a nutritional guide.
It's actually called Learn and Burn. Come in, we weigh you, we give you, look at your current diet agenda, then we adjust it, hand it over to Peter, you take the client, you go to the store and say, here's what it should be, and here's how we fit it into this protocol, right?
And now let's buy the product.
And
as long as we're buying the product, let's talk about organic food. Why should you buy organic food? What is the difference between organic and non-organic?
What does sustainable mean?
Sustainable means really, from an agricultural perspective, is that there's a respect by the farmer. Fundamentally, what it really means is that there's a respect by the farmer for the land. There's a lot of misinformation about what that really means, and that means that doesn't necessarily mean that they do not use some additives, but generally the additives that they
are mindful to Mother Earth.
Mindful to Mother Earth. For example, they will use natural fertilizers.
Right.
Manures, for example, are natural fertilizers. One of the things that we found is that all of these usage of chemical pesticides and at the same time chemical fertilizers has basically stripped the soil in this country
of everything.
Of everything.
Leaving it barren.
Exactly. So
and it's sustainable means rotating crops and leaving fields fallow for a while.
It means doing terrace landscaping. It means that you don't let the water run dry. I mean, it basically means a lot of different things. It means you're going to replace what you're taking out. Exactly.
Sustainable also, doesn't it mean like with farmed fish that they may feed it like bone meal or cow parts or something, so it costs more to feed a farmed fish in the farm, in the tank, than it does to let the fish feed in the wild. So it becomes so much more expensive per pound to feed that fish, and unhealthy because the fish breeds disease and they become sicker and they're more stressed and blah, blah, blah. So it takes more antibiotics then to feed the fish.
Right.
So that becomes less sustainable.
Right. In a sense, it does. It also means, like, and most people know this, the idea is we don't eat Chilean sea bass. Well, why? Because Chilean sea bass is overfished. We have to have respect for nature because essentially it's a finite resource.
It is.
And how does that mean, and what does that mean to us as a consumer or in a nutritional context? Well, you know what? If there's not very much of it, it's going to be expensive.
Exactly. Right. So we got to be smart. So then you bring everybody back to the kitchen, show them how to cook.
And then I bring them back to the kitchen and I show them how to do as little as possible to it.
And play with it themselves and get it prepared.
Exactly.
Take the fear out of cooking, basically, right?
Exactly.
So it's nutritional cooking made easy.
Nutritional cooking made easy. Give them some pointers.
Yeah.
We do as little to it as possible because fundamentally the less you do to it, the more alive it is, meaning the closer to nature it is, the healthier it is.
And the less allergenic it is.
Absolutely.
Well, Peter, this has been really fun. Thank you for being with us again
pleasure.
tonight. It's great to have you here. If people need to know how to get hold of Peter, you can give me a jingle. I'll put you in touch with them and we'll connect you guys. And I'm happy to share all kinds of information. If you need a copy of the video, just call us on the number that shows up on the screen. We're happy to help you out with that as well. And until next week, take very good care of your health and God bless. Be well, and we'll see you next week, okay? Thanks, Peter. It was really fun.
You're welcome.